It's really cool for us to be on this. We all obviously are like big CG Cookie acolytes. Yeah. We were all kind of having our nerd freak out that we got to go be on this podcast. So it's
definitely, yes.
Definitely including that as a side take.
Please do.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Denoise podcast, the podcast about the open source 3D animation suite Blender, hosted by your good friends at CG Cookie. I'm Jason van Gumster, and I am the lead consultant for CG Cookie's sister company, Orange Turbine. You might recognize that I am not your regular host, but hopefully you won't hold that against me. I have a really cool episode here for you with Wyatt Winborne from Studio Khimaira, along with Nick Pitts and Ben Johnson from Wolverine VFX. We're going to be talking about the recent work that they did for Entertainment Weekly, producing a full motion cover, and it was all done using Blender. Let's get right to it. Alright, hey everyone, this is the Denoise podcast. You know, I have to really ask how to properly pronounce this, but in any case, the reason why I have to ask that is because I'm not the normal host. Kent or Jonathan are, well, they let me take the mic for a second, and now I get to do fun things with it. And in the spirit of doing those fun things, I've got a really cool interview set up with folks who worked on really cool things in Blender. We've got Wyatt Winborne from Khimaira Studio. We've got Nick Pitts and Ben Johnson from Wolverine VFX. I think I got that right. If not, you guys can answer it first if you'd like.
I'm Wyatt. I was the director and, CG general something on the Borderlands cover, which is what we're here to talk about today. And yeah, I run Studio Khimaira or Khimaira Studio, depending on which social media handle you're looking at.
I am Nick Pitts. I am the compositing supervisor at Wolverine and on this project. And yeah.
My name is Ben Johnson, and I was the animation lead on this project. I'm also with Wolverine, primarily doing 3D animation and those things of that sort.
I guess this is probably the point where I should have led up with what is this we're talking about. And if you're just listening to this, you should actually go to the show notes for this, the accompanying blog post that goes with this episode, because that's where all of the visuals for this are going to start making a lot of sense. Because if you don't see it, it's not going to make any sense to you. But who wants to take a shot at explaining what exactly we're talking about?
I think that's all Wyatt.
Yeah, it's a Wyatt thing.
We are talking about a digital video cover for the magazine Entertainment Weekly that we were commissioned to do for the film Borderlands, based on the video game.
Sweet. Yeah. So the idea is, at least from my understanding, is that Entertainment Weekly magazine stopped doing print some time ago. But in lieu of doing print, they sort of maintained the visual aesthetic of their cover, but did these sort of motion graphics animated full motion covers to help do movie promotion as well as for promoting their magazine. And the people who produce those covers are not necessarily the people who are associated with the actual film production, as is this case, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, correct.
That said, you did get assets from the film to work on it. I guess we'll go into that in a little bit when we start talking breakdown and those sort of things. And I guess most importantly, relative to this podcast, is the work was done in Blender. So that's kind of an important fact to bring up. So let's actually talk about how this came to be. Like, how does this even get to be a thing, and how did the work come through to you all?
Yeah, so this is the third cover, I guess, I've done. Borderlands was the third cover I've done for Entertainment Weekly. The first one I did was for the Hunger Games prequel that came out, I think, last year. And yeah, every now and again, the heads there, I forget their official titles, but Kristen Harding and Chuck Kerr, and Allison, who I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on her last name right now. They reach out to me when they need a cover done and they can't photograph something. And hopefully now after this cover, they'll reach out to me even when they can, and they just want to make it a little spicier. But yeah, so they got in touch with me about doing a cover for Borderlands, which of the 3 covers I had done, or the 2 I had done up to that point, Borderlands was the only franchise where I was like a big fan. already. And I just wanted to go really big and, not really spare any expense and have this really be a showcase piece for my studio and now for Wolverine as well. And so I got in touch with Chuck. We started sort of thinking at first that Wolverine would do, some work here and there. And then it became this kind of full-blown collaboration where now it seems like our studios are basically a single entity.
Yep.
So up until this point, the other two covers you'd done essentially solo, and then you got in touch with Chuck Toolin from Wolverine VFX, and that's how Nick and Ben, you guys got in on the project.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Actually, just another background on this, because all this is done in Blender. Is this relatively new to you? Is Blender as a tool, or something that you've been using for a while?
I want Nick to answer first because he has the coolest answer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been using Blender for quite a bit. Basically, 2009, I was 9 years old, and that's roughly when I can trace it back to the first time I can document the fact that I used Blender. And that was for a Harry Potter spell that I did, where I got my sisters and a camera, and I was really excited about, I think it must have been, one of the Harry Potter movies had come out, and I was really excited about the spells, and I had seen the behind the scenes and seen how they used practical lights to light up the set, but then the visual effects were added later. That was just a completely new concept to me, so it was me trying to figure it out. And Blender was free, and there was this compositing tutorial for Blender involving lightsabers, and I thought, okay, maybe you could try to take that same thing, this kind of glowing thing, and make a Harry Potter spell. And it ended up looking like a 5-point star on my chest in the video. So it's but I was really proud of all 5 points of the star. So yeah. And yeah, so that was my first time. I have that video still, and I can date it back to at least roughly 9 or 10 years old. So yeah.
I have to let you know that you have officially made me feel dated and aged, because my Blender experience is older than you are, and I'm sad. I'm saddened by this.
Yes,
but that's okay.
I've never seen a world without Blender. So yeah, born in 2000.
And what about the other two of you?
Yeah, I first downloaded Blender, I guess it would have been probably 2015 or 2016, and I followed a 3D modeling tutorial. I had no idea that animation is where I was going to end up, but just kind of through making things in Blender and then wanting to have characters do things, I just kind of started animating very poorly, very bad animation. There's some animation, my early animations are on YouTube. They're quite silly.
What are they called, Ben?
Well, yeah, so you may have seen some of my earlier animations, depending on who you are watching this podcast. Or listening to it. I made a video my junior year in high school called Big Chungus versus Thanos.
It's actually
one of the best videos ever.
It's amazing.
That spawned a 7-episode series that may or may not have gotten canceled. Who knows? Maybe the 8th and 9th and 10th episode that were planned may end up find their footing one day. But through that, I was able to get some odd jobs, like actually animating for some studios, doing some stuff, animating frequently characters all the time. You kind of just get better at it until, I kind of found a footing, and then joined this, and Wyatt was gracious enough to have me be the lead animator on this project, and it was a very educational and awesome experience.
Yeah, for anyone who's listening, you absolutely, in addition to going to the show notes and looking at our cover, possibly more importantly, must search for on YouTube Big Chungus versus Thanos.
Yeah, and honestly, they went
special.
pretty viral. There's a chance you might get some deja vu. You might have already seen it.
Yeah.
That was my identity for a while. To everyone that my friends, would meet people and they'd go, "Did you know that he made that video?" And I was like, I don't want to be the Big Chungus guy.
Oh, it's so good. We spent a lot of time while working on this cover talking about Ben's exploits with Big Chungus. And
yes.
More recently, Ben, what did you put out?
I just put out a Star Wars fan animation on my YouTube channel. It is a Clone Wars style recreation of the Anakin versus Obi-Wan duel on Mustafar. It was made entirely in Blender. It's like a 16-minute long animation. It took 3 years, and it was a very long but fun project, and that was also
insanely impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, so the point, the reason I asked Ben to say that is that I think something that's important to understand about this specific project is that there wasn't a single person on the project who wasn't qualified to inhabit multiple different roles in the traditional visual effects pipeline. Like, Nick is a compositing lead, but also is like a trained C++ programmer. And like, I've been calling Nick, to my friends, an actual crazy color scientist. I don't know the degrees to which that qualification is actually met, but like, it basically is. And, you know, I have actually, crazily enough, been using Blender for less time than both of these two. I came from live action film, and I was working in post, in editorial, and in college I got my first like paying directing job on a music video, and sort of followed that and was directing for a long time. And right before the pandemic hit, I had just finished shooting my first feature, and when the pandemic hit, I was so disillusioned with the process of making that feature and how painful and excruciating it was. And I also was so hungry to go and make something else to sort of wash that taste out of my mouth, but obviously couldn't, that I just started picking up Blender. And I at first was like, oh, I'm going to make a little game. And then that kind of transitioned. I got really obsessed with this Icelandic filmmaker who, if you don't know, you should definitely go look up, named Roy Andersson. Spelled with 2 S's, Andersson, who doesn't actually make heavy use of traditional visual effects, but makes heavy use of old school matte painting. And I wanted to figure out how to make images like his. And that's how I got into Blender, and I became totally obsessed, like unhealthily obsessed, for about 3 years. And the first thing I did when I woke up was I was watching an Ask NK video about like what was new that day in Blender. And then I was, you know, on the Blender forums and listening to all of the updates while I would take a shower. Like, it was kind of actually insane, like a clinical level of obsession with Blender. And then about 1.5 2 years into that, I got put in touch with this director who was doing this very ambitious film that I think I still can't really talk about the details of, but I can talk about that studio, which is where I went to work, a studio called Mare Studios. And I was working with him on this really ambitious visual effects project. And, you know, I sort of was like, I'll come like mop your floors, I'll do whatever. Like, thinking I was going to go in and sort of be exposed as a fraud pretty immediately. And then it turned out, I didn't know, because I hadn't worked with anyone in Blender, nor did I know anyone who worked with Blender, that I knew the software really well from that 1.5 years of both passively and actively obsessing over it and making things constantly. And I became the CG supervisor there really quickly and did that for about 1 year, and then left to form this studio. And yeah, I like am scarily in love with Blender as a piece of software. It's made me just like think about software differently in general. Anyway, that's my long-winded story. Yeah.
No, well, see, this is something that's really there's a couple of things I'd love to sort of tease out from this as well. Is that so? One, I mean, all 3 of you are kind of Blender native, which is kind of sweet, and started your own studio, you know, kind of wrapped around Blender. Now, Wolverine was Wolverine doing a lot of Blender stuff, and you guys, were they looking for Blender people, or did you guys bring Blender with you to Wolverine?
Yeah, no, Wolverine has been for the past couple years Blender, but that actually was kind of a new thing as of a couple of years ago. And before that, it was only compositing, only, you know, beauty fixes, these types of compositing jobs. But slowly over the past couple of years, we've been trying to build our 3D demo reel, and that's all been with Blender. So,
and how is a studio size? How big is that?
Yeah, very small. So Ben and I, and then Greg, he is our, you know, producer, coordinator, data, tech, like lots of hats. Everybody wears lots of hats at a place this small. And then Chuck, you know, owner, supervisor, producer as well. And then yeah, I mean, that's basically our team. And then we do have consistent freelancers who come on. So in this project, an example is Max Vout, who is a Houdini artist, and he did that explosion and a lot of the dust kick-ups and stuff. So yeah, that's basically our team. Pretty small.
I think that's a really big thing to sort of tease out from the whole conversation, is that you'll have people who are especially just starting out in Blender, and there's the refrain that I've been hearing for over 20 years of Blender's not ready for production, Blender isn't used in production, Blender's not standard, blah, 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 blah. And while we don't know whether or not Blender was actually used in the actual Borderlands movie or any of the other ones, the fact is that it's used here, and this is still media and entertainment. It's still really impressive work. And getting into some of the details about the project itself, what sort of assets did you guys have to start off with?
Yeah, so we were given Claptrap, obviously. That was the most detailed model. I want to especially shout this out right now because it sort of came to light yesterday or this morning, I don't remember which, that one of the riggers and the modelers for Claptrap didn't get credited in the film. That model that we got, which I believe came from Framestore. I know Framestore worked on the movie, and I know what's the Apes one? Not as in Weta, as in the name of the studio is something.
Oh, right.
Apes.
Yes.
I'm forgetting at the moment. But yeah, Claptrap was the most detailed model I've ever seen.
It was crazy.
It was pretty crazy, and it was pretty old school also insofar as everything was geo. There was no, oh, this is baked down to a normal, this is baked down to a displacement. It was what was the original Claptrap, you guys do you remember? Was it 40 million triangles or something like that?
I don't remember that.
My computer didn't like it.
Yeah. A lot of the work we did on it was just figuring out how in the world any computer was able to work with that model.
It was a lot of fun seeing the detail. When you go in, you're in rendered view or something, and you see some welding between two pieces of metal, and you're like, oh, that's cool. That's that texture. No, it's legitimate geometry. No, that's
it was wild.
And even just when you would go into the model, everything inside, everything seemed like it had a purpose and a place to go. And I haven't seen the movie, but I don't think that we go inside of Claptrap, but it's all there. Everything is it was insane how much detail was put into that.
Yeah, it was very inspiring.
It was definitely built around Eli Roth, at some point randomly in the middle of production being you guys, I've decided that I want to have a shot where we dissect Claptrap piece by piece. And, so that any studio or any vendor working on it would just be cool, we've got Claptrap ready to do that. It was really impressive model. I just want to really shout that out because the people who worked on that model did incredible work. And we very fortunately received that model as well as some environment assets.
It was all FBX, or what format did you get that
all in? Alembic.
Okay.
All Alembic, which is, we really like working with Alembic. And then, some stuff, for people listening to this, I know a lot of Blender people aren't familiar with working in visual effects pipelines. Pipelines are really built around a lot of proprietary tools a lot of the time. And a big part of the reason you don't hear about Blender on big productions, even though they're definitely using Blender, is that it's not one of these proprietary tools. And so a big part of the work we did at the beginning, I think, we spent maybe 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
Just translating all of this stuff that had been done in Maya or Houdini or what have you into Blender. And that was...
and the textures alone, it wasn't just the geometry. Then Claptrap's textures, it was 90 Udem tiles, each of them 8K EXRs. It was just a lot of data. So
yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, and so the upside is that there is, fortunately, a lot of production studios are starting to use more open source standards, right? They're using EXR, they're using Alembic, they're using USD. You're not necessarily married to FBX or OBJ. But so as a mesh cache, you got the character in. That means it wasn't rigged. So you had to do any rigging on your own for that?
Yep.
We re-rigged everything. That was either Ben or Lewis, who's not present.
It was mostly our wonderful dear boy Lewis.
Yeah. Lewis, who is the CG lead, who also has a great YouTube channel that you should go check out, lewis.animation, I think. He re-rigged pretty much everything at kind of record breakneck speed. He's an incredibly talented artist. Yeah.
Very cool. So how long was the overall production for this? I know you guys were saying that you're running right up to the end of it. And I know when we were trying to schedule the interview, it was like this was supposed to be due by a particular date, and you guys were delivering on the day-ish.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We I guess I would say we were only in earnest production for about a month and a week. We had about 3 weeks of sort of, idling about, being like, okay, I guess we'll kind of fix these textures and like get this and ingest this alembic and blah, blah, blah. But the real work didn't, we were really just working on camera animation only for about the first 3 weeks. Just making sure we could lock in that timing and stuff with client. And obviously this is a client project, so it's a lot of, hey, look at this play blast that's just a bunch of gray boxes, and like we're asking you to imagine this entire, big thing. And then about a month and a week, I would say, was us actually working on the thing.
Yep.
And as far as like pipeline and that sort of creative direction part of that goes, I guess 2-part question would be, one, how much creative freedom did you have? And then I guess the other part of it is, did you follow sort of a kind of I'll say a traditional sort of studio pipeline where you have like boards, animatic, layout, and you work your way forward like that? Or is it more, this is a bunch of assets and we're putting together as a post project?
Yeah, well, that's another interesting part about this project as well is, we were given plates of the actors. And so that also definitely was a big part of the beginning process, is just figuring out, what could be done with these plates. And so, I think it was mostly Lewis and Wyatt there at the beginning doing that. I don't know, Wyatt, were you guys the ones who figured out, like with like Jamie Lee Curtis, like when she looks up, like that is a good place for the grenade and all that?
That was the biggest part of my job here. So on other covers, I've been like the one-man army, but on this one, I didn't have my hands on the keys that much, mostly in the very end stages where we were really grinding to get it done. But yeah, the really fun thing and the big challenge about these covers is they basically go, here's a bunch of plates on green screens. They're not shot in the same way. They're not lit in the same way. Sometimes it's moving with no tracking marks anywhere, and we're in a close-up. Figure out what to make with this. Which, to be totally frank, I think is like kind of my favorite, is the only way I've ever made films, because I like come from editorial. It's always this Russian film school sort of, here's a bunch of footage, make something make sense. And yeah, so the very beginning, before anyone else came on, was just me blocking out the idea in my head and, seeing Ariana's action and going, oh, maybe we use the grenade to motivate the entire rest of the shot, et cetera, et cetera. And then Lewis really helped me, dial that in. We figured out what parts of the plates we wanted to use and why, and then kind of got to work.
Yeah, so like the first time I saw the shot, it was in just kind of gray block phase. Wyatt had figured out, okay, the grenade could be thrown here, and then it could come here and bounce, and we can use this moment from Jamie Lee Curtis's plate where she's not actually reacting to anything. Like in the plate, I think she was examining something, but Wyatt used that moment as she looks up to like as if she's reacting to the grenade being bounced, and just a lot of creative problems solved already, just kind of figuring out what the rough layout of the shot was. And at that point, that's then whenever we started, like Lewis started then, we kind of knew, okay, this is the camera angles that we're going to have roughly. We know this canyon's going to be here. So I saw some of Lewis's then thumbnail drawings where he then was like, okay, well, this part here, like what could this look like final? What could the values be? What could the landscape look like? And so we kind of used that gray block base as then a way to generate ideas for what these things would actually be. And we ended up going through a lot of iterations as well. At one point there was like a vehicle driving by that never ended up being a thing. Part of that was to like hide some of the facts. All of the plates, we didn't have any legs. They had shot the kind of medium shots, so we were trying to figure out creative ways to like, how do we like have no legs? And that's also another funny thing, is we eventually did have legs, and that was Kevin Hart's legs, I think, and Ben did that. So Ben, you should talk about that.
Yeah, well, so we had all these characters on all these plates, and every single character was standing behind boxes and rocks and something, crates. And so all these characters, there was no contact point for them anywhere in the scene. It was just they were there. And I think that it's like fine for that if it's some of the characters, but I just felt like we really, really needed at least one of them to be touching tangibly, like contact with something that you could see in the scene, so that you would be like, well, if like Jamie Lee Curtis if for whatever reason you look at it and you go, oh, that kind of looks like she might just be a card there, but then you look at Kevin Hart next to her and you're like, but he's standing there, so it must just like it works, And so what we ended up doing was we just cut off Kevin Hart's legs. We cut him at the belt. We cut him at the belt. We had we kept like some of the and you can see this in the breakdown, we kept some of like the holsters and stuff on him and the buckles, and then I 3D tracked, or I guess it was a 2D track in 3D space, just an empty to where his belt was, and we got a very nice digital double of his character as just one of the assets that we were provided. And I just took the legs from that and used inverse kinematic setup to parent his waist to the footage, and it was just behind him in 3D space, and it looks crazy from any perspective other than the cameras, and it's
hilarious.
And let me just say, it's such a good job that there was zero compositing touch up on that effect as well. Like, it's 100% just out of Blender there. Yeah,
all in Blender. Someone on Reddit said, I never knew that Kevin Hart was just a cardboard cutout with 3D legs.
Golden.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, I think the fact that it was all done without the additional post on it is super cool. Now, the shot itself, it gives the impression that it's one long take, but you guys didn't do that in one single scene, right? Or did you have one blend file?
We rendered, not only did we have one file, we also did not do the speed ramping in CG. So we rendered out 4,300 frames of animation.
Yep.
It was, to say ill-advised would be an understatement.
It was a nightmare.
To say we'll never do it again. Yeah. So
that sort of makes me immediately wonder, you have a single blend file. How do you collaborate on that?
Yeah.
So this I actually think will end up being the most interesting part of this podcast, because the big problem, as I understand it, that we're all trying to figure out in this community around Blender is, how do we make it really work in a traditional pipeline / do we even need traditional pipelines? And that's what we're actually working on now, is better collaboration, etc. And we did a somewhat normal approach, but did it pretty manually, where, everything is using links and someone's working on this chunk of the environment while another person's working on this. But we don't have file locking. We don't have a lot of things that you should have to ensure. We don't have any version control of any kind. So it's very manual and very fragile.
And just to clarify, when we say one file, one file is the final render file. We did have lots of things linked in and all of that, but then as far as the memory management aspect of it, that's the part that's just, it was a bit crazy to render from one file, but that's what we did. So
yeah.
That's kind of cool and amazing. I have a selfish question. Did you use the edit link library add-on?
Yes.
Yay! I wrote that. So
did you write that?
I wrote that.
Oh, I love that add-on.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Nice.
So
you can't use linked libraries with it. I've always been like, why is this not a native feature? Like, why do you have to turn this on?
It's a workflow that the Blender Studio doesn't quite like or sanction, but they know that there's a value to it, and so that's why it's shipped with Blender, and that's why it's one of the main.
That is like one of the top Blender add-ons. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. That's like up there with Node Wrangler as just like you pretty much have to have
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So on extensions.blender.org, please go make me a review. All right. But no, so that's actually a really, so basically you have a scene file that you use for final assembly, kind of like the same way if you use the sequencer for pulling in a bunch of linked scenes. Now you just have the one scene where you have a bunch of different assets. And I guess because the team is small enough, you can say, Ben, you're doing animation. No one's going to touch that. Have fun.
Yeah.
And I guess, but you're animating in a linked file. You're not animating in scene because that's just for assembly, right?
No, well, so we had a file that was just the like each character essentially had its own animation file, and then we were able to bring in the sort of like gray box basic geometry that was used to inform all of the environments. So while people were making the environments based on the rough blockouts of it, I was animating in the rough blockouts. And yeah, Lewis helped out with the animations too. And so that's kind of how the two of us did that.
And that's part of why we were able to do stuff like that, is because of how small our team is. You would start to say, okay, but there are going to be problems then. Like, what about like making sure Claptrap's wheel is touching the right areas and all that? And it's like, well, yeah, that's just solved by Lewis and Ben talking about it and being like, this is where Claptrap's wheel is. Go ahead and make environment here. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something to be said from just, old school communicating with people and having conversations.
100%.
It's very real. And also, like, as a all remote coupling of studios, we were about as in person as you could possibly be, given that we were on a Discord video chat and screen sharing with each other 8 hours a day, like every day.
That's one of the things I forgot to ask you guys at the beginning. Where's everybody located? You said everyone's fully remote, but where are you at?
Yeah. Yep. I'm from Texas. And Texas is pretty big, so like kind of East Texas area. Yeah.
I'm in Indiana in the States, so Eastern time zone-ish, towards basically just the middle of the Midwest.
And I'm my apartment is in LA, but I'm kind of in between, annoyingly between LA and New York.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm somewhere in between those two cities. Try to figure it out. No, yeah, I travel back and forth between LA and New York, which I only specify, because if you want to get a coffee and talk about Blender, I can meet you in either of those cities.
Wow.
Well, that's cool. So your communication with each other, you have these files, and these are all hosted. They're all hosted, I guess, on Wolverine servers, and you guys are collaborating that way via Discord or a closed network, or?
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah. Why?
No, we used LucidLink on this project, which served us really well. Sorry to LucidLink, we're probably switching away from it just because we need something that's actually, I think this is, I say this because I think it's applicable. We need something that's more open, less of a black box, more, like Blender, open for us to go in and tinker with.
For the people that don't know, could you explain what LucidLink is? And
yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, of course. LucidLink is basically a NAS server in the cloud. For anyone who doesn't know what a NAS server is, you really can think about it as very fancy, much more expensive Google Drive or Dropbox or what have you. It's basically that with a few more bells and whistles.
Okay, so you have that as your file storage, and then collaboration as far as like conversations there through chat, phone.
Yeah. All through Discord.
Discord mostly. Discord. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
We use Discord like other companies use Slack.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It does the job. So it's, I guess in the spirit of working on a project that's based on a video game, it kind of fits.
Yeah.
That's so true.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Sweet. So, all right. Is there anything I've missed? Is there anything that I'm supposed to ask you about, or that you just were really excited to talk about that I just failed to ask you about?
Yeah, I don't think so, Jason. I think that's basically it.
Well, cool. Fantastic. And we'll, again, for anybody listening, check out the blog post, because there is going to be, I'll make sure of it, because I'm going to pester these people until I get them. But we'll have the video embedded and the breakdown available for you to look there, as well as some happy text that explains what we're talking about. That way, if you don't feel like listening to us, you can just read. Which is funny because I'm saying this now, and you have to be listening for you to hear me say that. Well, with that fun story in mind, I guess. All right, I'm going to close off with one fun thing, and that's what's your favorite Blender feature?
Ooh.
And your least favorite Blender feature.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll start with my. Okay, this isn't like a least favorite. I guess it's more of a lack thereof. I'm going to start with least favorite. That way you end on a high note with like the most favorite. And least favorite would be, I guess, I don't know what's going to be involved in getting an export for a deep pass, but that would be nice. And also, we were looking at having a multi-part instead of a multi-layer export option would be pretty cool as well, for multi-part versus multi-layer EXRs. And that's something that we were looking at specifically for Fusion compositing. It looks like Fusion is going to prefer multi-part as we were glancing at it. So that's something that could be, I guess, improved.
So trying to do that without abusing the file output node?
Yeah, exactly. Because also the file output node, I think your crypto passes will break if you do a multi-part. So we want, basically the short version of it is EXR 1.0 needs to go up to EXR 2.0 so that we can have multi-part and deep data.
Yep. And then favorite feature. This is difficult.
This is tough.
Yeah.
I have mine. My least favorite, for the record, and I want to say that in the spirit of Blender, my least favorite is also that we don't have EXR 2.0, and we, as we speak, are currently working on implementing EXR 2.0, first through an external tool, and then hopefully contributing to Blender to get that added. So we're not just a studio complaining about what a free piece of software doesn't give to us. We are also contributing. And my favorite feature is really simple, but I think it's underappreciated because I've worked in Maya and other 3D programs as well. Blender is totally unrivaled when it comes to its use of the keyboard. The fact that you can basically do everything with your hand off of the mouse to, I say that slightly figuratively, is so incredibly important. And for anyone listening, learn how to use the keyboard in Blender. It is what makes the difference between the speed at which you'll model in Blender and the speed at which you'll model or lay out in another software.
Yeah, I agree. I really love, this is going to be probably a little bit standard and cliche, but I really love the Cycles render engine because, it's genuinely great in the fact that it's free. It just doesn't make any sense. And so that's where it is these days, where you can basically model in rendered mode is kind of insane. So modeling, texturing, and so the user interface for all of that is top notch as well. So
Mine is probably also just when it comes to animating, because I have worked in Maya quite a bit. I feel like for me personally, just some of the things with like the graph editor and the node editor and the interface there, and honestly just a huge thing is how it feels to look at what you're looking at and to grab your graphs and your keys and to move them. It just feels like it's just, to me, it's just better than anything that I've used, and I really, really like that.
Yeah. I want to throw in one bonus thing, which is, I was talking about this the other day. I think I was maybe talking about this with you, Nick, as well, is it used to be that when people in my life who were in the tech world in some way would talk about software, my eyes would kind of glaze over and I'd be like, who cares? And I think I've realized recently that most of the reason I felt that way is because the software landscape feels very feudalistic and it's just all like, this is our land, you can work on it as long as you pay. And that's what I mean when I say that the degree to which I fell in love with Blender was so extreme. Is it felt like the first thing where I was like, this is mine. The whole world could go up in flames, and as long as there was electricity somewhere, I could use this still, and I could keep improving it. That I think I'm like a big evangelist for why, even on a political level, like open source software is so important. And not only is it important, it feels different to use. And that is actually my favorite thing about Blender.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%.
I'll clap for that one.
I'm a big proponent of the not just the open sourceness, but the Blender community itself being like one of the best features of the application. Yes. It's not just that people are helpful. It's that sense of ownership. I mean, ultimately, Blender was liberated by its community. We bought it, so we do literally feel like we own it, and it's nice that culture has pervaded even for as long as it has since becoming open source. So sweet, fantastic.
Yeah, well, and it's also the whole community. That's the reason why it doesn't feel wrong for us to go around and say things that we want improved in the software, because like for a lot of other softwares that'd be like, why are we doing this? But it makes sense here. That's the whole point, is the community is working to make it better constantly, and that's just crazy.
Something I've also noticed just with the community is that a lot of the experience that I've had in other softwares, it's usually people just complaining about it. And a lot of like whenever a software crashes on someone, the people get mad at it, and people are upset that this new feature hasn't been added. But I feel like every time something with Blender happens, it's just, I guess it's just the open source nature of it. But like when Blender crashes on me, I'm like, oh, it's okay. Well, you're fantastic in every way, and I can't be mad at you.
That's great.
That's so true. That's great.
Well, cool. I'll just wrap this up. If anybody listening to this wants to find you and talk to you, and we'll say mildly stalk you in the least creepy way possible, where do they find you on the interwebernets?
I have a YouTube channel called Hello There Animation, and then I also have a YouTube channel called Ben Johnson VFX. So if you want to see my kind of bigger, more ambitious projects like my Star Wars video as of late, it's on the Hello There channel, and then my Ben Johnson VFX channel just kind of has recent projects where I just kind of, if I make something, I might just throw it on there. My Hello There name, brand, whatever, has an Instagram. I'm going to try and kind of start bringing it back to life a little more if you want to go check stuff out there too.
And that's something I want to say too, just about working with everybody on this project. One really great thing has been that all of us are filmmakers at heart. And that's been something that I think is also just been very different about this working environment, is everybody, we're all filmmakers. And so for my social media, I don't have a big social media presence, but I do make short films and stuff. So my YouTube is Huey House Productions, and my Instagram is Huey House Productions as well. And that's HUGHEY for Huey.
We are on Instagram at Khimaira.studio. Website currently in maintenance, www.khimaira.studio. And an important note here is it's not, we really set out to make it as confusing as possible. It's spelled Khimaira, not the traditional spelling of chimera. It's some like ancient Greek spelling or something. And then on Twitter at Khimaira Studio, no period. YouTube, I think it's the same. It's one of those two things, either .studio, or we're also on like Reddit, like u/Khimaira.studio.
And I guess Wolverine VFX is just WolverineVFX.com.
Yes, totally. Correct. Yeah. And also, Wolverine VFX on Instagram and LinkedIn as well.
Just look in the show notes and click all of them.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that about covers it. Thanks a bunch, all of you, for taking the time twice to record this. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Denoise podcast. Be sure to check out the blog post and show notes that go with this episode, because that's the one where you're going to see all the cool visuals that we talked about in this episode, as well as having all the useful links that are mentioned for all of our guests and the studios they represent. All of that content, plus a whole mess of courses for learning Blender, are available on cgcookie.com. And if you have a company or a studio that uses Blender and you need to have consultation help, definitely check us out at orangeturbine.com. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review and sharing the episode with your friends. That would help us a lot. Thank you for listening, Have a great rest of your day.